Translating one language to another is not always the smoothest process. There are so many intricacies in languages that can make one sentence lose meaning when brought overseas. So when Yu-Gi-Oh came to America, there was a lot of translating on that schedule. Each set needed its own English version for every single card, which, as you can imagine, takes a lot of work. As such, the distributor, Upper Deck Entertainment, decided to have some fun with that process. That process has left a lasting legacy on how many view the popular card game. Because sure, you could translate Itazurazuki na Futago Akuma as mischievous twin demons, but delinquent duo as an alliteration rolls off the tongue better. But for every one of those, we get Aqua Mador. Like, what even is a Mador? Points to my Yu-Gi-Oh! CG series, wink wink. Many translations create a ripple effect down the road. Early Yu-Gi-Oh! Was simple enough, but as time marches on, so does new cards and archetypes. The largest group to make a problem are Cyber cards. Cybernetic is an archetype subset of the Cyber style archetypes: Cyber Dragon, Cyber Angel, and Cyber Dark. Due to this, support for both Cyber and Cybernetic are synergistic. This is a problem when Upper Deck starts translating cards that do not belong under this umbrella. Mecha Falcon gets turned to Cyber Falcon, Devil Franken gets turned to Cyber Stein, and Cybertech Wyvern gets turned into Cybertech Alligator, just as a few examples. So all these cards require a parenthetical. This card is not treated as a Cyber card in their text for future reprints. On the flip side, many Archfiend cards would need to get a parenthetical rather than a name change. This is because Archfiends in the OCG are called Daemon. Demon? Spelt differently from demons. These are much older forms of demons. While they could technically be interchangeable, you could find subtleties between the two. Regardless, such a hellish title would not fly in the TCG. Thus, cards like Summon Demon, Demon Tamer, Death Demon Dragon, and Demon's Axe would get renamed as Summon Skull, Shadow Tamer, Fiend Skull Dragon, and Axe of Despair. Yeah, for some reason, Upper Deck didn't bother even trying to fit all these cards under the same name. While they would settle on Archfiends come Dark Crisis, the damage was already dealt with every release beforehand, aside from a deal with Dark Ruler, which did not include Archfiend in its name since a deal with a demon didn't quite work when Archfiends were turned to a special category, in which Dark Ruler Hades, the clear monster in the art, was not part of the OCG archetype, because his OCG name is Demon King of the Underworld Hades, and not Daemon King. As to why Konami made deal an Archfiend card and not Hades, I have no idea. Other times, cards would receive entire name changes to avoid archetypal confusion. Some famous examples include Harpy's brother turning into Sky Scout due to the Harpy archetype, Red Eyes B Chick changing into Black Dragon's Chick due to the Red Eyes archetype, despite it being directly tied to the Black Dragon. At least now certain cards like Black Metal Dragon don't need to include except Red Eyes B Chick in its effect. 100 Eyes Dragon needed to get fixed to remove the hyphen since that sign tied it to the previously mentioned Red Eyes archetype. Yes, all the card needed was the letters for Red Eyes spelt out to include it. Some cards like Amazon Archer need to get fixed to make it an Amazoness. The same goes for Cliff the Trap Remover and the Dark Scorpions. Sadly, others do lose that early TCG flair, like with Frog the Jam changing to Slime Toad, or Kinetic Soldier getting renamed as Cypher Soldier to fit in an anime-exclusive archetype. A weird translation that involves archetypes must include Hardened Armed Dragon, whose OCG name is Hard Armor Dragon. This is an example of a seemingly proper translation becoming incorrect. Maybe it should have been Hard Armored Dragon instead. Sometimes Upper Deck got lazy and decided to not even translate some names. While now many of the names are memorable to some of us, logistically the only sense it makes is time, budget, or motivation. They have to translate a ton of cards, people. I mean, could you imagine how hard it is to translate Raigeki as Thunderbolt? Mikazuka no Yaiba as Crescent Dragon may have been a too long don't care situation. That one would get a retrain that would combine the two names together. Neat. So clearly the name had an impact even in Japan. Seiryu most likely kept its name over Holy Night Dragon due to the holy part. Faith Night Dragon doesn't make sense, but the later release archetype would find a better solution in Starry Night. Makes you wish we got Starry Night Dragon way back then. The Death cards like Death Wombat are the romanization of death, which makes sense why Upper Deck would want to keep some form of it, as weird as it sounds. Death Lakuda is the strangest example of this, since Rakuda is the Japanese word for camel. Due to phonetics, it got changed to Lakuda, respelled the way it is, and printed instead of simply going with Death's camel. Fushio Richie is another oddity. His more properly translated name is Undead King Lich, or Nosferatu Lich, but his base name is spelled like Fushio Richie, and clearly Upper Deck didn't want to bother with it, despite it being an ultra rare in Pharaonic Guardian. The last card under the Keeping It Japanese umbrella I want to discuss is Manga Ryuran. For many, this is the only manga card. While technically that is true, over in the OCG, this couldn't be further from the truth. See, regular Ryuran's translated name is Dragon Egger, which, let's be honest, sounds off. Not Dragon Egg or Egg Dragon, no, Egger. You'd think this guy directed The Lighthouse or something. So, okay, keep his Japanese name since it sounds better. But now, do you keep the Toon version's name the same, or do you properly translate it? Does it become Toon Dragon Egger? No, Upper Deck decided to also translate Toon as we view Japanese toons, which is manga, because a half translation in Toon Ryuran didn't make sense. Due to this, we now have the only manga monster, which is effectively just a toon that Upper Deck changed to be consistent. Now we have all the recolored counterparts, which were different monsters in Japan. These make more sense when given they use the same design. Illusion Sheep and Sleepy? How about Mystical Sheeps, number 1 and number 2? Sometimes this can be weird, like with the previous example, where Sheep number 2 came out a few sets before number 1. Sometimes we wouldn't even see the other number, like with Fiend Reflection number 1, despite it getting a retrain in 2024. That was the best time for an extra card slot. Makes you wonder why they didn't call number 2 the first one unless they had plans to release number 1 in a tournament pack or something. Other times there would just be an error regarding their names, like Wyvern being called Winged Dragon Guardian Fortress number 2, despite the card not being a dragon, but a winged beast type. Steel Ogre Grotto number 2 wouldn't even be a counterpart to any of the Ogre Grottos in the game. Same deal with the Darkfire Soldiers and Crawling Dragons. Certain counterparts, Upper Deck wouldn't even be consistent in the naming convention when looking at Hibikime and Sonic Maid, and Kurama and Whiptail Crow. At least Dark Elf is its proper name. Like Emperor's Judge was more or less correct, whereas Megami was stuck in Japan. Guess you can't always win when it comes to translations. Then there are just some strange changes. Luster Dragon number 2 was originally released as just Luster Dragon. This was before Upper Deck released another monster called Luster Dragon. Thus, the number 2 had to get added to the first one because they shot themselves in the foot for not translating their names properly as Emerald and Sapphire Dragon respectively. Makes you wonder why they didn't call the second one number 2, but I digress. Red Eye's Black Dragon had the black shortened to B, even though Upper Deck would fit Blue Eyes' whole name on that card. In the case of Giant Trunade, Trunade is a misromanization of the Japanese word for tornado, Torunado, despite the OCG card being called a hurricane. Piling on that, sometimes English comes through. Cyber Vary is now Cyber Valley, even though Vary is in regards to a scientific variable, and not the land term. Buster Launcher getting turned into Buster Rancher is just hilarious. Like, is it supposed to be put on a salad? A card like Beaver Warrior getting changed from Luis makes sense, if not funny, even though the English manga use both names as one. And there are some cards that get a total name change for no apparent reason aside from being fun, like when fans thought Mochi Toad would be brought over as Treat Toad to only be proven wrong with the introduction of Totally Awesome. Which, to be fair, it is. On the other end of the spectrum, fans thought Crystal Machine Halofiber would get translated as Crystron Needle Fiber, to only get perplexed by Crystron Halkifibrax. A significant downgrade in my opinion. Finally, we have misprints, which were improperly translated during one step or another, and had to be fixed upon a later print. When it comes to these, there are not too many examples. Trial of Hell getting changed to Trial of Nightmare may be the most infamous of the bunch, whereas Big Shield Garna may be less known. Yeah, Garna originally had a U due to miscommunication between Konami and Kevin Tewart. There are a ton of translation examples one could discuss. Heck, there are plenty I had in my notes that I just couldn't fit in this one video. Red Moon Baby, Dark Trap Hole, Marie the Fallen One, etc. All that stated, which translations are your favorite? Or which ones do you despise? Let me know down below, and feel free to join my Patreon to support the future of the channel. Have a wonderful day.